Uh, you see why we love a cappella music? Jules, he arrived from Australia on Friday, well, actually on Saturday morning at about 12 o'clock. It's what, about 2 o'clock in the morning for you right now? We're joined this morning by good friend Dr. Matthew Morine. Matthew is a leading voice in Churches of Christ on discipleship. He hails from Castle Rock, Colorado, and right now we're ready to receive the word, brother. Come and preach.
I was invited to go down to Texas with the preacher family from Nova Scotia, and she said to me it would be a free trip to Texas. I had one problem, though. I had a girlfriend, and she didn't really think it would be a good idea for me to go to Texas with another girl. So I called up my girlfriend, and I said, Natasha would like for me to come to Texas with her. I will be down there for about a month. I'm going to go to this Christian camp at Camp Bandina. How do you feel about that? She said to me, it's me or the trip to Texas. Well, I realized at about 19 years old, I could get another girlfriend, but another trip to Texas probably wasn't going to happen. So I went down to Camp Bandina, which is in the middle of nowhere in Texas. It was very hot. It was not as beautiful as it is here in the Washington, D.C. area. And while I was there was this one student. And this one student, he won Male Camper of the Year every year. And he knew something. He knew. He knew if he could convince the unbaptized heathen Canadian to become a Christian, he had Male Camper of the Year sewed up. And so every single day, he'd come to me and he'd be like, do you want to study about baptism? And I would say, no. He'd be like, have you thought about baptism? And I would say, no. And it wasn't that I was not pondering being a Christian, but I knew one thing. I was not going to let him win Male Camper of the Year. And so even on Saturday morning, he knew the award ceremony was going to happen soon, and he woke up that day and he says, you need to be baptized. And I said, no. Now it worked out because on Sunday morning, Brian Garnett went and tried it at the Nueces Canyon Church of Christ. And I woke up that morning and I said, Brian, I want to be baptized. What do I do? He goes, I'm going to preach a sermon. You're going to walk forward, and then I'm going to baptize you. I got saved. He got the job, and I am here today. It is truly an honor to be here today. Jules, you are an amazing worship leader. Jordan. I call him Jordy, and so I got confused because I get dyslexic. You have been nothing but gracious and kind, and it has been so wonderful for your hospitality. Thank you. I got to also see Civil War stuff, which was absolutely fantastic. I'm an American citizen who grew up in Canada. I've been an American citizen for less than a year now, and I am truly happy to be here in this wonderful area. Thank you for having me. Thank you for this invitation. Now, my bad camp experience causes us to halt good evangelism because none of us want to be icky. None of us want to be awkward. And some of our evangelism strategies in the past has been kind of paint by number. Here's this Bible study, here's the verses, and you just go through it. But it really wasn't a way of making people feel connected to us. And I want to look at the woman at the well and Jesus and see some principles of evangelism. Let's look at this. John chapter 4, verse 5 to 7. And so he came to the city of Samaria called Sychar, near the parcel of ground that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. And Jacob's well was there. Jesus, therefore, being wearied from his journey, was thus sitting by the well. It was about the 6th hour. There came a woman of Samaria to draw water, and Jesus said to her, give me a drink. He has this ability to make the gospel interesting to people. He looks for their need, and then tries to open that up in the conversation. I remember some years ago, there was this lady who came to church, and she wanted to talk to me about hearing voices. Now, I don't believe this was a mental disorder. I believe this was just kind of negativity. But she believed in these voices, or these negative spirits were coming down upon her. And I asked her, well, what were you doing about that? And she goes, well, I got this rock, and I taped it to my ceiling, and that protects me from negativity. And I said, well, how's that working for you? She goes, not good. I said, well, would you like to learn about a way to protect you from this negativity in your life? And she goes, yes. I said, have you ever heard about the Holy Spirit? She goes, no. Let me tell you about the Spirit. Jesus is going to talk about living water, because that's what she cares about, water. I wanted to talk about the Spirit because she cared about her spirit. We got to start to learn to connect with people for where they're at and not show up in evangelism or in discipleship with a pre-packaged plan. So this is what he does. The Samaritan woman therefore said to him, how is it that you, being a Jew, ask me for a drink, since I am a Samaritan woman? For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans. He's actually able to talk to people that they don't believe would talk to. But when it comes to evangelism in our culture, I really had this sad moment in my life. I realized that everybody who talks about evangelism talks about the Samaritan woman. And then I realized I'm that person. I felt bad about myself. And then I sat there and I thought to myself, why is it that every time some speaker comes and talks about evangelism, they want to talk about the Samaritan woman? And I sat there not listening to the speaker that came to Castle Rock to talk about evangelism. And I sat there forever and I reflected on, why did I do this? He was doing such a bad job with it, doing the same old thing. And I was like, that's me. And so I wanted to reflect, why did I do it? And I came up with this. The reason we always talk about the Samaritan woman in evangelism is because we're comfortable evangelizing or discipling down. We're very comfortable in telling others of the gospel when we are making social economic decisions. We are very uncomfortable evangelizing upward socioeconomically. We enjoy and we're much more willing to help people that we consider to be of, and I don't want to say this, but this is how people put it, of a lower socioeconomic class. We will have coat drives and food pantries, but we don't know how to evangelize upward. And this is why we're comfortable in Samaritan woman evangelism. But have you ever thought about how to evangelize Cornelius? Now, I live in Castle Rock, Colorado. I know this is a very wealthy county. Castle Rock is a very wealthy place. I live in Douglas County. It's the 5th richest county in America. Everybody is what we call a super county. Everybody makes about $150,000 plus, and they all have master's degrees. We are in a very affluent area. Well, if I'm the preacher and I am to do evangelism, I have to evangelize up. Hence, I'm a preacher. I only have one way to go, and that is up. And so I wanted to come up with, and I wanted to think through a model. How do we reach people who are affluent? And so I thought about the Bible, and it's Cornelius. Look at this. It gives us a little clues into his station of life. Acts chapter 10, verses 1 to 2 provide some clues. At Caesarea, there was a man named Cornelius, a centurion of what was known as the Italian cohort, a devout man who feared God with all his household, gave alms generously to the people, and prayed continually to God. This man is very powerful. He is over a cohort. You have him being a leader, and he is giving generously, not just to like the Roman work, he is also giving generously to God. He is a man of means. So how do you share the gospel with him? I got thinking about this, and the way I started to do this is we have usually presented the gospel as a gift, not as a need. So what I mean by this is that a lot of times when we approach people, we approach to them as they are in a position of neediness. You need the gospel. And we almost attach it to benevolent concerns. Let us do for you. Let us help you. We are the strong. They are the weak. We want to bless them. We may bless them materially. We may want to bless them spiritually. But we kind of position ourselves in this relationship as the ones in power. The ones that are above. Now, if you go to somebody who is leading a major corporation, they may be a CFO, a CEO, or they may be some vice president, they are sitting back thinking, you know what, I don't really do this. I'm used to being in the position of power. So how do you open that door? What I do is ask for money. I'm a tennis coach. And I always have, especially the girls, it is just what it is, but they can't win a tennis match if they think the other team looks cuter than them. And every single time we show up, and they're like, but they look so cute in their outfits. How come we can't have that? And then we lose. And so I will get money for the kids on my team to get uniforms. Sometimes we have girls that really can't afford a racket. I will partner with people in the community to help me provide leadership to the tennis team. They can all agree on that. But then all of a sudden, I am discerning if they have good hearts. And I start partnering them with good works. I go to them because they have gifts to give. That's what they do with Cornelius. And so I do the role reversal. I place myself in the position of neediness. They get to be in the position of power. But a lot of our evangelism has been, we have been in the position of power, and they are in need. And so I flip that around and I ask for a gift. That's how I open the door. But back to the Samaritan woman. But look at what Jesus does in this case, and this will work even with wealthy people or non-wealthy people, because this is a human condition now. Jesus answered and said to her, if you knew the gift of God and who it is who says to you, give me a drink, he would have asked him, and he would have given you living water. She said to him, sir, I have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. When then did you get this living water? He told her, go, call your husband, come back, and I have no husband. She replied, and Jesus said to her, you are right when you say you have no husband. The fact is you have had 5 husbands, and the man now you have is not your husband. What you have just said is quite true, sir. The woman said, I can see that you are a prophet. Now Jesus is busting through this dynamic of shame. So everybody, when you talk to them about the gospel, when you talk to them about discipleship, there is going to be something that wells up in them, and it is a wall. And if you don't deal with that wall, you will never break through. You can't talk about spiritual things without the idea of shame rising up. They may not say it explicitly, they may not come out with it, but they are thinking shame. And so he does this, and the problem, though, is we have a lot of preconceived ideas about people. So when we look at this Samaritan woman, is she a sinner? Has she sinned, or has she been sinned against? Do you look at her and say, 5 husbands? Whew. She has made some poor decisions. Really, the reality of it is she has no empowerment back in this day. She has been put away, or her husbands have died, and now the man that she is living with won't marry her. She has no control over her scenario. Maybe they have divorced her, or they have died, but you know one thing for sure, she has hurt. She has gone through pain. And that shame, though, is not going to allow you to continue further in the conversation. And if your heart in evangelism is one of condemnation, like if you look at somebody and be like, oh man, you sinner, you need Jesus, and they sense an ounce of judgment in your heart, they're going to cut you off. But if you have a heart of compassion for them, like you care about them, they will be open to it. So this is why I came up with this idea of tell your story. We don't give facts, we tell your story. And so the storytell is the aim approach. First of all, you be authentic. Then you create interest, and you talk about how God has made a difference in your life. Whatever you do, don't be this person. I grew up in the church, and my parents were perfect. My grandparents were perfect. We have never had any sin problems or any dysfunction in our home at absolutely all. And all I can remember is about how my church was absolutely perfect as well, and we never had any hypocrites in this church. Would you like to come? And they were sitting there because of their shame thinking, and no way do I belong there. But create authenticity. We talked about this morning of looking for what they're looking for, and this is what Jesus does in this story. It's this idea of you start with some weakness. If somebody is like, I'm struggling with being a dad, I struggle too. Wherever they were at, try to share a story of a weakness. And then create interest. Where are they looking? What problem are they seeking to solve? And then tell them the difference that Christ has made in your life. Everybody should have their aim story. Why is this? Because we all have 3 levels of interaction. The first one, fake. You walk into the church building, you've been driving here, it's been 45 minutes because you have to commute a long time, and you've been fighting with your wife the entire time. You've been yelling at each other. The kids are in the back. You have yelled at them a few times, and you're like, "Rrr." And then as soon as you pull into the parking lot, you get out there, and somebody says, how you doing today? Oh, I'm blessed. Today's a great day. I'm so happy to be here to worship. And your wife is looking at you like, whatever. But you're not going to say, my wife and I have been fighting the whole entire time, because if somebody does that, you're like, you don't want any part of that. So you have the fake, and it's natural. But you can't evangelize in fake, so we go to facts. And that's what we used to do. Gospel facts. I'm going to teach you the truth. That type of methodology. And there is the truth. But that's only a certain level of comfort. It's How was the sports? What's the weather? You definitely don't talk about politics here. But you will mention facts, and you don't go certain scary topics. But here's the key. If you want to be a great discipler, evangelism, you have to get people to share an emotion with you. You have probably talked about your faith and it went really bad. But here's how to know when to talk and when not to talk. Say this. Oh, I went to work today and I got so angry at my boss. And then see what they do. If they say, oh yeah, that sporting team's really having a hard season. And if they don't reciprocate emotions, you're not ready to share the gospel. Don't go there. It's going to be kind of weird. But if they say, oh, you were mad at your boss? Let me tell you about my boss. And if they share an emotion with you, you have busted through. And okay, I'm going to show you the next slide. It's going to have something on it, and you're going to be like, okay, you ready? You ready? You have busted through the Kantian-Noumena phenomenal divide. You have just smashed on through there, and you didn't even care. But this is why when we talk about spiritual things, it's this idea of, in the 1700s, you had this separation of information. You had two realms of knowledge, the nominal and the phenomenal. The nominal is the realm of God, ethics, values. It contains statements such as, there is love, I feel happy, hockey is better than football. The heart breathes Canadian still. But you have the phenomenal. On the other hand, is the realm of facts, evidence, data. It contains statements as 1 + 1 = 2. The sky is blue. Water boils at 100 degrees Celsius. And so when somebody you don't know that well busts through this, they feel very awkward. And they don't like it. They feel uncomfortable. And so if you can use a few emotion words, and if they use emotion words back, you know that you can now share your faith. So Paul does this in Acts 22. Look at what he kind of does. Acts 22, 1-5. Paul shared information about what he did and thought before becoming a Christian. I killed Christians. You know what? I'm not having shame in his presence anymore. I'm good. And then he talks about the tension here. He creates the tension in the story, and Jesus appears to him. What? You mean the guy that you were trying to take out? His people? He shows up? Do you think that created interest? So look at the authenticity. Then he creates interest, and then he talks about the difference that Christ has made in his life. He starts going to Gentiles. He starts working for this guy. You see that Christ has made a change. So your homework is, and I know, Jordy doesn't give homework, but I'm going to give you homework. I just want you to go home and create your AIM story. Create your AIM story. What would you say is the first thing? I always tell the story of I was a heathen in Canada to all my American friends. And then everybody's like, oh, I want to listen to this. And then the difference. So where would you start? And then interest is you tailor it. But then what could you say that Christ has made a difference in your life? Where would he be most impactful? So we kind of got to learn to flip these conversations. I love it when the Philippian jailer, what must I do to be saved? And because I'm a good Church of Christ guy, it's like baptism, baptism, baptism. Maybe that's not what he's really asking. He's probably asking, how can I convince you to stay around so I don't get a spear through my stomach? That's what he's saying. So. But we see it as baptism. He's probably being a little more dualistic in this writing here. But they still share with him, Jesus, what must I do to be saved? And so they kind of look at that opening, and you got to look at those connections because there is this existential cry. Everybody's looking for transcendence, meaning, community, love, freedom, forgiveness, intimacy, uniqueness, connection, usefulness, approval, harmony, wisdom, redemption. All right. So a lot of times when somebody comes and talks about discipleship, they talk about how well they do it. I'm going to tell you the opposite. Here's how not to be evangelistic. So, I become a Christian. I get baptized in Texas. The Texans say I get to go first now in the the line for heaven. We know that's not true. So I come back home and I'm going to this HVAC school, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. I got to ride the bus every day. And this one day, these two girls get on the bus, and I see them every day, but they sit there, and one girl looks to the other girl, and she tells her that she cheated on her boyfriend. And she goes into some detail, and I was like, yes, this is great, because I don't have to convince this girl that she's a sinner. Look, I overheard it. It was right there. So I lean in. I lean in for Jesus. And I say, fornication is a sin. Do you know that most non-Christians don't know what fornication means? So I had to define it. So I explained it. And I gave them a good talking to. I let them know that was wrong. But then that afternoon, this never happened. I would always see those two girls every morning, but in the afternoon, one of the girls got on the bus. Not the fornicator, the friend. And I was like, the fornicator probably has a hard heart, but the friend is going to be receptive. And this is Nova Scotia, Canada. Look, we got the Halifax Harbor right there. When we got on that bus, I just expected her to pull that thing, ding, 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 ding. There is water. Let's do this. And she comes and she sits right in front of me and turns around. And, it's game time. I'm ready to go. And she leans in and she goes, that was the most arrogant thing I've ever seen in my life. Who do you think you are? And she chews me out. It didn't go very well. So we had no baptismal story at the end of that, and there's no happiness. So I did it again. So I was down in Texas going to preaching training school, and I'm home. And I see my friend Sean. And Sean sees me, and I'm with my mom. And Sean's like, where have you been? I said, I've been down in Texas. He goes, what are you doing in Texas? I said, I'm going to preaching training school. He said, be quiet. He didn't really say be quiet, but that's what I have to say to you all. And I said, yeah, I'm going to be a preacher now. I'm down in Dallas, Fort Worth. I'm learning to be a preacher. I'm a Christian. He said, be quiet again, even after I told him I was going to be a Christian. Well, my mom's standing next to me, and I'm trying to convince him. I'm like, Sean, I'm going to be a preacher. And in fact, I'm going to preach Sunday morning at the Kentville Church of Christ. You need to come. And he said, be quiet to me again. So I looked at him and I said, Sean, you need to come to church because you're a heathen. My mother was mortified. My parents were not Christians at that time. And my mother is like, oh no, he's down there at this cult. And he's home calling his friends heathens. And so Sean looks at me. And I was like, Sean, you need to come, you heathen. And I knew he was a heathen because I was with him. I was with him. And my mom scolds me, Matthew, quit calling your friends heathens. Who do you think you are? I was like, Mom, he is a heathen. And then Sean's like, corrects my mom. He goes, no, I am a heathen. Like, truth is the truth. And on Sunday morning, he showed up. He still will kind of follow me on Facebook. But what was the difference between the girls and Sean? What was the one thing that made the difference? Because I was not kind to both. What was the difference? Relationship. You know, one time I gave this talk to a congregation in Texas, and one lady yelled out, because you were a heathen too. But when we create authenticity, create interest, and talk about the difference that Christ has made, let's look at the impact. So the woman left her water pot and went into the city and said to the man, come see a man who told me all the things that I've done. This is not the Christ, is it? They went out of the city and were coming to him. And from that city, many of the Samaritans believed in him because of the word of the woman who testified. He told me all the things that I have done. So when the Samaritans came to him, they were asking him to stay with them, and he stayed there 2 days, and many more believed because of his word. And they were saying to the woman, it is no longer because of what you said that we believe, for we have heard for ourselves and know that this one is indeed the Savior of the world. This works. This works. When we create authenticity, be real. Show a weakness. Create some interest. Connect it to where they're at. And talk about the difference that Christ has made in your life. You will have a ton of opportunity to disciple people and to be in people's lives. Because this works. So learn to tell your story, because people always listen to your story. I'm going to offer the invitation. The invitation is this. Think about how you would start your story. What difference has Christ made in your life? And if you tell that to your friends, your family, your neighbors, people will come and be part of the church. Why don't you